Here.
Tinsley.
Here.
Strong.
Here. 2.01 is approval of minutes. Motion is to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of April 28th, 2021.
So
But,
moved.
this one. Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 2.01.2 is a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of May 19th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 2.02 is the invoice listing. Motion to approve the invoice listing for April through May of 2021. Do I have this motion?
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 2.03, Ms. Powell, Treasurer.
As of March 31st, 2021, PennDOT's balance was $37,604,926. During April 2021, local, state, and federal revenues, totaled $1,463,808. Disbursements were issued in the amount of $3,215,909. As of April 30th, 2021, PennDOT's current balance is $35,852,826. The motion is to approve the treasurer's report for April 2021. Do I have this motion? So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 2.04 is the budget transfer report. Motion to approve the budget transfer report from April through May of 2021. Do I have this motion?
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 3, Superintendent's report, Dr. Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Good evening, everyone. This unforgettable school year coming to a close. I'm certainly aware that thoughts are turning to next school year. I am increasingly being asked, what do you think next school year will look like? Will we still be in hybrid? Will we be in school 5 days a week? And generally speaking, I've been telling everybody I am optimistic, and I have many good reasons to believe that we will be much closer to what normal feels like to start the school year in schools. The percentage of adults and adolescents that are getting vaccinated, particularly in this county, is reaching very favorable numbers, and COVID case count is now substantially down to much less serious levels. Although there's a lot of mitigations in place this year that I do not expect to see next year, there are elements to cyber and virtual learning that were proven to really be what you could call essentially educational lifesavers for the district and for some students. So to that end, I've asked our assistant superintendent to brief the board on what cyber support may look like when we return to school next year. So I will turn it over to Dr. Kaminka, who I also know has our supervisor of blended learning and instructional technology, Mr. Chris Warniak, here as well. Mr. Kaminka.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Stein. Yes, Mr. Gorniak is here. He's been instrumental in this process. Actually, when we started our cyber program well before COVID, we got a quality program off the ground that had not been here in place before COVID, so he's been instrumental in that process. But we do have tonight a presentation regarding next year's cyber opportunities. I mentioned this last month. I would like to begin with starting with what we know right now. And this slide is to take a look at the cyber interest has changed throughout the year. And I'm looking at just considering in-district, our students in-district. Now, last month I know we talked about districts, we then added district cyber programs. Well, we have a slide later about how we're going to try to market that significantly this coming summer, actually in the next month for sure. So I'll get to that in a few minutes. But if we look at this, back in October, elementary families wanted a cyber option. 15% of our families in October were in cyber program. Now it's 10%. There's a nice drop there. Middle school families, you can see there, a significant drop of our 28% October, now 9%. So all kids are back in middle school in person. At our high school families, a big drop as well. We all know that October there was a lot of kids that were selecting that cyber option, but we're down to 30 to 35%. So we continue to be optimistic. These numbers go down. Just just hearing feedback from parents, teachers, parents, the principals. We have these team meetings. They're already having those conversations. And as COVID continues to go in the right direction as we see it right now, hopefully that cases continue to drop. We anticipate more students to return in person for next year. I do want to share this. In-person instruction is invaluable. As professional educators, we recommend in-person instruction for students. Academically, behaviorally, emotionally, socially, students have a better opportunity for growth when they are learning in the classroom. Our comprehensive plan and our portrait of a graduate visions are best executed with teachers and students together in the classroom. In-person learning offers more opportunities for personalized and explicit instruction, communication and collaboration experience, and that's a student to teacher and student to student. Critical thinking with their teachers' facilitation and guidance, creativity, and a teacher's personal feedback in real time. Students can develop their character skills by organically socializing with their peers and by participating in social and emotional learning activities that are supported by our teachers, school counselors, and administrators. Yet, some students may stay virtual. They may remain virtual. And the reality is, not just in our district, but statewide, nationally, we read a lot of articles. Some students flourish in a virtual environment, and so we have to be ready for that. There is still potential COVID concerns for incoming fall, so we are realistic with that. We respect that we may need to accommodate a cyber option for these families. That's what we're here to really talk to you about. And Mr. Gordon, again, as Dr. Simon said, he's here. He's going to help lift a lot of this presentation. And he can begin by reviewing the definitions of cyber, just to make sure that we understand terminology.
Thank you so much. My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. So just to review a few terms that we're probably a little bit too familiar with at this point. So cyber or virtual learning is just really learning through a device, not in person. Then we have synchronous learning, which is that live learning that Dr. King talked about. And then we have asynchronous learning, where students work at their own pace without that teacher's assistance in a live situation. And hybrid learning, of course, is a combination of in-person and virtual. It can be synchronous and asynchronous. So the big two to remember really is synchronous and asynchronous. All right. So what could our cyber elementary model look like, or what do we hope it will look like for next year? And the key term summarizes at the top. Key terms: mostly synchronous with some asynchronous work. So this bears strong resemblance to what we're currently doing with some improvements in my opinion. ELA and math will be taught synchronously via Zoom or a similar program. As Dr. King expressed, our teachers are one of our most strongest assets here, and we want to expose students in a synchronous fashion, in a live fashion, to those most critical subject areas of ELA and math. Social studies and science will be mostly asynchronous with some synchronous opportunities. So we do have the opportunity to reteach portions of it with small groups of students and provide that synchronous support as needed, but mostly asynchronous. The way this day would unfold is sort of similar to some of the cohorting that has gone on in kindergarten or other grade levels, where half of the day would be synchronous or live for ELA and math, and the second half of the day would be asynchronous for social studies and science. Now the benefit of that is we can use a single teacher to teach two grade levels in a very meaningful way. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but I want to focus on the advantages for now. So the advantages of this approach. We know that elementary students can't be on Zoom all day, so this will provide a balance of instruction types while focusing on those critical academic areas for live instruction. Everything really comes off of ELA and math. Science and social studies use aspects of both those components, and that way we want to focus our efforts there. This is going to limit that extended Zoom time as we talked about, and if you're a teacher now who is teaching, let's say, kindergarten reading in the morning and then a first grade in the afternoon, you're going to have intimate knowledge about those specific grade level instructional tools, specific lessons that you can use to support and move some kids higher or support those students who may be struggling a bit. The other benefit here is we're talking about collaboration. We're talking about getting ready for life. And if I'm the teacher of grades 2 and 3 cyber, I can have these groups collaborate very easily. I don't need to talk to another teacher to work out some kind of bug system or share authentic writing and things like that. So I see a tremendous benefit to having that single teacher teach both sides.
I'm just going to jump in here. So we did talk about last month about bringing in a LTS cyber teacher for the elementary. If you remember that slide, I had 10%. If you stayed at 10% in the fall, it was like 10% of interest in cyber, we're looking at more than a third teacher. But we're gonna take a look at that as we go through an enrollment process and see actually what that number is. And that we may actually be less than that depending on the actual numbers when we get there.
So this is what this could look like. And the little asterisk on the bottom left is very important, as Dr. Kamick just expressed. This is enrollment dependent and also contract dependent. So the vision that we have is we have 3 dedicated cyber teachers, similar to what we have now, except a single teacher would service K1 with that sort of A&PM model, 2, 3, and 4, 5. Half the day would be synchronous, half the day would be asynchronous, with opportunities to support all subject areas, and we'll have a dedicated special ed teacher who will service K-12. Secondary model looks a little bit different. This is going to be primarily asynchronous with opportunities for synchronous sessions. Now, the reason I use synchronous sessions is students are going to be part of either a PDSD created course or an APEX course. We'll have scheduled opportunities for live support. This live support could consist of lessons, it could consist of reteaching, it could be whole group, small group, or on an individual basis using a video conferencing tool. These support sessions can be requested by the teacher. So let's say I just gave a lesson and I noticed my async students, 5 of them are struggling with a specific math concept. I can say, hey, you 5, I want to see you on Thursday on Zoom at 3 to 3:30 or whatever time that be, so we can go over that and I can teach it in person via Zoom and give them that support. So that can be requested by the teacher. It can also be requested by the student. So perhaps a student is struggling with an asynchronous course and they want that support. They can email the teacher, hey, let's set up a time where we can communicate and help me develop better understanding of that concept. We can certainly have that as well. We also have catch points built in. So if a student's average falls below a 65, or let's say they were out and having this 2 days worth of work, that teacher would then prompt an ongoing meeting with them until they get up to speed. A big difference between this model and what some well-known cyber charters have to offer is that they may use the term synchronous, and I've sat through their information sessions and had to do my due diligence. They use the term synchronous, but their synchronous model is like a live one-way stream. So it's the teacher teaching. Students can only text to that teacher. They cannot collaborate with their peers or things like that. So it's kind of a misnomer. This is far more robust. This offers that live support even in an asynchronous course, and that's where I've seen a lot of students, fall down where it's exclusively asynchronous. They don't have that support.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
Will our teachers, our pedagogical teachers, will be teaching from the classroom, correct?
Correct.
Not from home?
Correct. They would be teaching from the classroom, but they'd be accessing students.
Right.
Yeah. All right. And the benefits of Pendelco Cyber is essentially you have all the bells and whistles that an in-person institution can provide. So you have me as a point of contact. The students will have a district issued Chromebook. They will also have tech support via the help desk. And most importantly, our wonderful administration and staff. So access to all the administrators, principals, teachers, school counselors, the curriculum instruction department, supporting our teachers in helping them, cultivate the best lessons, special ed department, and of course the tech department. Anybody who's part of our Pendelco Cyber program can participate in all sports, all activities. The one disclaimer is some of these clubs are required to be in person. It's hard to play on the football team if you want to try to do it through Zoom, not going to work out so well. So if you want to be in sports, you certainly can, but there may be some restrictions due to just the limitations of what those activities are. And we encourage all cyber students to participate in some. And our goal really is to deliver the best options for and outcomes for all students. So, we've tried to bring people back, and we want to basically preserve the funding and use our teachers to provide that best outcome. So in the year of 1819, the efforts to bring students back through cyber resulted in a 17% decrease in student loss outside charters, which is great. However, COVID had that backslide a bit, I think through no fault of our own. This year alone, so Dr. Bennett in that first slide showed the total percentage of people who were in some form of cyber. The 26 students that remained in our Pendelco Cyber was exclusively that async model. These are the people who really probably would have been those who got to the cyber charter, and we managed to keep 26 of them here, which resulted in $500,000 in savings. So it's working, and I think we have a better iteration this time around, a more well-rounded version, different touch points built in. So I think we'll see that number hopefully will go in a positive direction. So
So of those 26, we actually didn't start the year with 26 students starting in that Apex Cyber Academy. It was actually about a third less. Over the year, and I have to credit our teachers, our counselors, our assistant principals, Mr. Borniak. There was about 30% of the kids that actually were moving their way. They wanted, for whatever reason, wanted to move to an out-of-district cyber school. So when that happened, they had a team meeting. We were able to have a meeting, explain the benefits of being part of the Apex Cyber Academy within Pendelco, and we're able to keep that 30% of kids. So it ended up being 26 kids, and that was elementary and middle school. So that was a great grab, and it was super important. So that kind of work happens actually every single year since we started the academy, going back 3 years ago, and we have a process in place that eventually comes to my level. And if the parents still want to go to PA Cyber, myself, Dr. Son, will get the parent when they come. So we're like at that level. We'll get them on.
I think with one thing COVID has done is brought our parents to have faith in the district to have a cyber program. So 5 years ago, they would say, well, how can Pendelco run a cyber program? They don't have it. They're just recreating one. Let's use the professionals. Well, now every teacher in the country is a professional on Zoom and teaching asynchronously. So I think we will get more of our students back. If we, every one that we gain is a huge accomplishment. But I think they have more faith in the district that we have a good program to teach their child through Zoom or through a computer, as opposed to something 5 years ago when we're just starting. It's kind of like going to play for the Super Bowl champion as opposed to the team that finished in last place. You pick the professionals. So, it's a great step in the right direction. It's an awesome plan laid out for the district, and I think we're going to be successful in getting a lot of our kids that are out of district back in.
Yeah, that's let me show these next slide. So it's a good segue to that next slide that we do want to market our Pendelco Cyber. We absolutely want to reach out to the families that are out of district in a cyber program. Borniak and I will analyze the data. We're going to look at very specifics of like grade level information. Depending on how old the students are, it kind of will format how we target and entice these folks to come back and make sure they understand the benefits. But we plan to do personal contact with those who have chosen a cyber option outside the district. We plan to do information sessions as we did in 18-19, which again, we brought back, I would say, about a handful of students. I think we had around 10 or 12 students when we did that. So we hope to do the same, if not better. Then again, we want to push out outcome-based marketing materials to drive families to see the advantage of choosing our district source cyber learning, and we'll be working with Ms. Palmerini on that as well. So we definitely want to specifically work with those folks that are out of district. So we want to continue to evolve the cyber program. When it comes to improvements, we want to make some significant, compelling improvements here. And at the core of it is our teachers. And so we want to strengthen our cyber curriculum, designed and constructed by our district teachers. We want to strengthen the asynchronous instruction crafted by our teachers. And we want to offer synchronous instruction and support at least every 1 to 2 weeks for each course by our teachers. So right now they're used to live streaming this year. If families want live instruction, that's come in the school 5 days a week in person. If they're choosing a cyber option, the one thing that Mr. Borniak made a comment about is that when we look at district cyber program, the connection of synchronous instruction that doesn't happen in those cyber out-of-district programs, I think it's separated. So we really want to make sure that our teachers are supporting students every 1 to 2 weeks with intention, curriculum instruction, scheduled days that are very consistent, but also, as Mr. Borniak talked about, when students need added support, then we have a vehicle for that as well. So that's not that getting less live instruction, but again, like we had said earlier, it's primarily asynchronous work that the students be going and doing. However, they have that access to our Pendelco teachers, which I think is a missing link when you look at other out-of-district cyber teachers. And they try to say synchronous, but not necessarily is what we're going to be offering.
and just to piggyback on that, also when a student does have a challenging moment in some of these outside charters and then they want to get support, the only access they can get is either a text message or a scheduled phone call. I don't know about you, I need to be able to see somebody, I want to be able to share my screen or vice versa. So it's just a lot more interactive, and I think that's where we can really sell ourselves and make some progress.
Yeah, and this is definitely the goal that we want to work towards too. And overall, I mean, we want to increase our teachers to student interaction and student interactions. It's one thing we've learned over the year, when you're live streaming kids at home and in person, it turns into this lecture format, reduced amount of teacher to student interaction, reduced amount of student to student interaction. That's why we want that live instruction. We're asking families to come in person. But if you want a cyber option, you can do that, and we have it. We're going to be offering. We would like to offer, as our goal is to offer 1 to 2 weeks of every 1 to 2 weeks synchronous instruction opportunities for our students. So next steps that we want to get on moving forward, we want to start even next week to start to push out communication that the district and state have expectations for the 2022 school year. Will be that we're offering 5-day weekly academic schedule for all grades. For our cyber opportunities, we want to push out the model that we have in place, the information that we're sharing with you, we want to push out those details, and also create an enrollment process where families can actually enroll their student into the cyber program. That will help us with programming and preparing for September. So that will be an important piece that we get on that as soon as we can. That's it. Any questions from me?
Thanks. Thank you both for the presentation. Awesome stuff. I've been a real advocate of, not only as a board member but taxpayer, trying to get some of these dollars back from cyber charter. And now that we, as a parent, if I had a child in cyber charter, there's no way I wouldn't switch Pendelco based on, the support sessions, the extracurriculars, just the learning that we have. A suggestion that as you guys go with your information sessions and marketing plan, we have a top-notch technology team right here that I would recommend we do, testimonials from our cyber teachers, cyber students who have excelled over that those 26 kids, see if we can, and use free social media to push it out there. And it would be, I wouldn't, it's hard to gather why you want to stay with cyber charter when Pendelco Cyber is right here with a more just loving approach to learning that you do not get from a charter school. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Comments?
I have a couple. One like feedback and then a soft question and then maybe people something upsetting. One was I remember Dr. McGowan even bringing up where we started trying to bring people back a while ago. It's around the same, I might be wrong, I think around the same time as when we were trying to picture our Chromebooks or iPads back then. So the comment is, it's very important to call it out again. We'll say you, but you guys saved $500 million. So it's called what it is. So you guys should be very appreciative of that, or I'm very appreciative of that. One, Mr. Korniak, I think you even called the words, I made sure I wrote it down, this is the word valuable as far as mentors. So absolutely, I find that very valuable. Give or take, elementary, middle school, and high school, from October till now, give or take about /50%. I guess just my question, and maybe call me dumb to ask this question, why is it still so high as far as at the high school level, 30 to 35%?
I'll start with our seniors and having a senior. I did speak to that too. What we did in most high schools for seniors, there was like a rule you have to take X credits, even though you may have enough credits to graduate, you still have to take X credits in your classes in your senior year, right? So you're still part of the full program. This year, because of COVID, we're trying to reduce numbers in school. We went, a lot of high schools went out and gave high school seniors an opportunity to say, hey, you only need three classes to graduate, right? We're going to let you just take those 3 credits, put it on the year virtually. To be honest with you, like, even though when we started bringing kids back in person, some of those kids were like, know what, I'm just gonna finish the year, right, I'm just gonna finish them up. Elementary, I'll speak to them, in middle school, we almost got pretty much everything. Like, it's hard to speak with the 9%, very small group there. Elementary, I would say that they got used to the LTS, Pendelco teacher that we had in place, so they're like, hey, I really like this item. You know, she's been there all year, I don't want to change for April, and my kid wants to finish out. And so we felt like that number didn't move as much as we were thinking, but it definitely moved. So, you know, and we're not far off from a lot of the COVID concerns. And things have moved real fast in a positive direction in the past 3 weeks, like, which is good news. But if I heard any one story from the principals, it was when it came to elementary, it's like, you know what, my child has been in that class all year, I don't want to change another disruption in the first 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you. And then the harder question, you might have answered it, but maybe if you can call out that particular bullet. So even look at it for myself, ways to improve professionally and personally. Or so you have like next steps, or, you know, hey, this is how we're gonna change things within it. If you had to pick 1 or 2 reasons why you're going to every 2 weeks for each course, and I'm not saying that particular one. So my question is what do you think has changed? What are you pivoting? What are you changing? What are you saying, oh man, that's not really, why do we think of it doing that way? We all do that, right? We all think if you throw something out and you think, man, that didn't work. We gotta do it this way. It's, you know, you gotta try. So I don't know. I think you have, it looks like you have.
Yeah, I think I have the answer. So the 1 to 2 weeks is really the longest period of time where a student could go without getting synchronous interaction. So that would be it. Everything's going. ACEs with that course, nobody needs help. The teacher's still gonna meet with those students at least 1 to 2 weeks. I would hope that the teacher will be meeting with them more frequently for those support sessions, but that would be the outer limit. So we wanted to put something in place there so that we don't get a situation where the kid says, I'm doing great, the teacher says, you're doing great, we don't need to communicate. So we want to sort of force that interaction. I think it'd be a lot more organic and happen a lot more frequently than that, probably a few times a week, where they're, you know, grabbing a small group or a few kids here and there. So really that's just if everything wouldn't go great, we still want to have that interaction. That's why it's only for the course.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And that's the main reason I asked is, you know, we're always looking for ways we're going to do it different. How we did it in October, November. So I just wondered, you know, what were some of the reasons or what has happened that you're like, yeah, we can't do this next year.
And we want to set our students up for success, and without that teacher interaction, I think that's where you'll hear cyber school be that if they don't have that, they have lower graduation rates. You know, when we were doing a lot of homework around this, that's when you see like very low graduation rates. And when you start to look at the model of what actually happens and how they support a student, that is one common theme that's missing in our opinion. If you're not checking in with that student, you don't have a layer of support, whether it's actually instructing and making sure they understand the content material, or it's more of like coaching students up. You know, they definitely have to have strategic targeted support, and you don't want like trends not to go too far before that teacher is jumping.
Any other questions? All right, Dr. Kimmington and Mr. Gorniak, thank you for that information. I appreciate it. Happy to inform the board that Pendelco was one of 5 districts honored with the highest award from the Pennsylvania School Public Relations Association. It's called an Award of Excellence for our communication special project that was called Graduation in a Global Pandemic. The award was issued by Pennsbrook, and while the award focused on communications efforts, it recognized that it was the content, the actual activities, that served as the foundations for the award. Congratulations should be extended to Lisa Pomerini, our communications coordinator. I would note, though, that she said, I am so proud of the team who contributed to producing and executing the events, including Mr. Sassy and his counseling team, Joey D. Camillo, class officers and sponsors of the class of 2020, and the music department at Sun Valley. Their contributions to the production not only made it a memorable and beautiful experience for graduates, but demonstrated how well our Pendelco team works together in crisis. So out of 500 districts, it was great to see Pendelco recognized as one of 5 for the work that was done for the class of 2020. last year to recognize them. And I will pass along presentation to the board. I'll send that to you, an email notification of that, so that you can see some of the things that we put together for last year. You do that work in the heat of the moment, you pump it out, and you never get a chance to step back and look and say, well, that's pretty high quality, and that was great for kids. And that's why I have every confidence that the high school will do a great job with our outdoor graduation this year. That wasn't the only award. This was also acknowledged with an award of honor for our crisis communications during COVID. And this too was a team effort headed up by Amy Bell. And Delco was one of only 15 of the 500 districts in PA that was recognized with an award of honor for this work. At school board meeting, or last meeting, the administration presented a proposed final budget that requires the use of fund balance to cover a deficit. It's a rare action by the administration, but it was done to ensure that we do not need to cut programs to account for certain unmet expenses. I should note that those unmet expenses are remarkably tied to what we're talking about, cyber charter tuition costs. This year, Pendelco had just 26 students who qualified for special education services and attended cyber charter school. Those students alone account for $750,000 in taxpayer funds going right out the door. In our district, those 26 students would cost not more than $130,000 to teach them. We have sole special education teachers that have 20 students alone on their caseload. Think of that, one teacher, 20 students versus 26 students in cyber charters that are costing our taxpayers over $750,000. With a cyber charter tuition bill of close to $1.5 million, taxpayers do not need to ask why the budget proposes to raise taxes. That's the answer. The cost of cyber charter tuition consumes the added revenue that we will receive from any additional taxes. That's sad. It's sad for kids, and it's sad for our taxpayers who work too hard to see their payments going out to entities with terrible academic performance, extremely low high school graduation rates, and no accountability whatsoever. On tonight's agenda, there's an update to the district's health and safety plan. That update clarifies that staff and students engaging in high exertion activities while outside do not need to wear masks, consistent with updated guidance from Chester County Health Department. Administration is seeking approval to create several instructional interventionist positions for the upcoming school year. Those positions will be funded from federal grant dollars that have been issued to districts as part of several COVID relief bills that were passed by Congress. The key intention of those funds is to ensure that efforts are made to address potential learning loss, particularly in students in our early grades. Pleased to note that our plans for commencement to be held in the stadium field, 6 p.m. on June 8th, are well on their way. Board members, please get back to Sharon with any of the information that we need for your gowns and for your participation. Mr. Sasson feels very confident in where his school is with final preparations. Senior awards will be done virtually again, and those will be held Monday night, but also a tape of the awards will be available for students to view at another time, or for relatives, grandparents who may want to see that at a different time. I want to thank our elementary principals, Danielle Murray, our elementary kindergarten teachers, whose participation in last night's virtual kindergarten info session was terrific. We had over 75 parents in the virtual kindergarten orientation and attendance. I could tell by the questions that they were submitting, parents found it to be very, very helpful. Just looking ahead to the agenda tonight, I mentioned 807 being language with regards to updating our school district health and safety plan. That initial agenda indicated that it was to permit select field trips. That is not the language, so it will be to approve the update to the Pendelco Pathways to Reopening School Health and Safety Plan as presented. And that only change, again, includes the changes that were permitted to introduce in terms of mask wearing outdoors. And I've asked the board president also to add motion agenda item number 8.20 to permit the creation of the instructional interventionist positions that will be funded from the federal ESSER grants to ensure that we have some additional assistance for students next year to make up for any potential learning loss that may have been created over COVID. I can tell you that initial research is saying that students have not fallen behind as far as people think that they would. That in fact what has happened is students have learned a different set of skills. They learn skills that maybe won't be tested on a PSSA, but they've learned how to collaborate. They've learned how to use technology. I mean, look at the first graders who can Zoom now. It's quite remarkable, right? There were different skills that students learned in the course of last year that necessarily don't get tested. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. And research is also starting to say, don't just necessarily assume that every student's behind. Continue to accelerate, continue to presume that students will rise to the challenge and provide support when we have evidence that they need that support, not assume right out of the gate that students are going to come in 1 year behind. What I have seen from our staff and our parents and our kids this year was a lot of learning. It wasn't ideal. For some students, virtual learning was an enormous challenge. But for the vast majority, they did not lose a year. They just did not. And they had core foundational skills that were being developed. We have assessments that show that students who were behind in December are already starting to pick up the pace and get up to levels that we want them to be at. We have every confidence that we have 13 years to help a child from the time they start in kindergarten to the time we give them a diploma, that they are going to be ready for life. And that's our commitment that we make for parents, and we're going to honor that commitment one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stockton. Number 4, announcements for the public. In accordance with Act 48, the Sunshine Law, the board met in executive session to discuss personnel and litigation matters. Any comments by members of the board?
Yeah, Mr. Ryan, George, is it all possible that the recognition for the graduation events last year, because of the level of contentiousness that occurred with Mr. Sassy and the entire staff over that time, it turned out a wonderful product. We all know it's wonderful. But is there a way to advertise that out in the social media world that we can get that already, that we're out there? I just feel that was, I knew it was a, top 5 out of 500 schools, but just want everyone else to be sure of that.
Absolutely, and I'm going to ask Lisa to do that. I can see that Lisa won't promote it in some ways because she's very humble. But again, the award really spoke to the things that were done, not so much the packaging of it, And if they hadn't done those things, there's nothing to promote. But we will make sure that that's done. Thank you.
No one for board information and discussion. Number 7, comments by members of the public.
Should I go over the podium?
Agenda items only at this point. Is it
Sorry?
agenda item?
Well, it's about the cyber school and retention.
That would be for at the end of.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have an
That's okay.
agenda, so.
That's fine.
Thank
The
you.
beginning is just so people have voice their opinion on something.
No, that's fine. I
Okay.
don't have an agenda. Thank you, though. All right, happy to wait.
New cyber position. No, the other thing is, so on the agenda tonight, related to cyber, is just a motion to extend elementary long-term sub-cyber teaching position. But I'm assuming that wasn't what you were looking for?
No.
Okay, great. And I'm sure the board will take your comments at the end. Thank you.
I'm totally good, thank you.
So items for board action start on page 2, carry on page 3, 4, 5, and then at the end of page 5. References the Penducco Budget 2020-2021, the Act 93 plans, PDEA agreement, PDESPA agreement, PDSSPA agreement, PA School Code Section 110. It is administrative recommendation to approve all personnel items as presented. Do I have a motion? Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So a couple of addendums to tonight's agenda. As Dr. Steinhoff said, 8.07 will be changed to say to approve the update to the Penn-Delta pathway to reopen schools health plan and safety as presented. And add 8.20, instructional interventionist. The motion is to authorize the creation of up to 3 instructional interventionist LTS teaching positions effective for the 2021-2022 school year positions. And this is made possible through the ESSER's grant funding of Dr. Steinhoff. So that will be at no cost to the district. So tonight we're going to have a consent agenda. Any board member wish to pull anything off, we voted individually. All right, so I need a motion to approve 8.04 through 8.20.
Second.
Please note that all contracts, preparation and solicitation of bids are subject to an approval by the solicitor. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Number 9, comment by members of the public.
Do I go to the podium or?
You can go to the podium or up front if you, whatever way you
Wherever you're
go.
comfortable.
I don't know if I want to be right in front of the camera.
There should be a button right on the microphone.
My name is Melissa Lavery. I live at 101 Greenbrier Place in Aston. I wanted to thank you for your dedication to the Penn-Delta Cyber Program. This presentation tonight answered several of my questions, which I do not have to ask, so thank you. I too hope to see us retain more of our students in-house. That's really important to our district. As stated earlier, many families have chosen to leave our district for whatever reason, and it would behoove us to investigate further. We can also better understand the needs of our population through the CARES Task Force adopted in both June 2020 and February 2021. By acknowledging individual experiences within the population, we can provide all students with the services required to retain them. We will not be able to attend to the distinct needs of individual learners if we remain disinterested in understanding their experiences and desires. Although it is up to administration and the staff to implement policies adopted by the board, many of us are still wondering about the status of the CARES Task Force. Has a steering committee been formed? If so, have they begun to meet? What stakeholders are involved? The CARES Task Force is an important tool of self-evaluation, which is the cornerstone of education. As a district, we have observed the need for such an evaluation, given some acceptance of hurtful perspectives by members of this board, students, and throughout the community. Which families are seeking alternative publicly funded options because their children do not feel comfortable here? I am sure that decision does not come easily. It would be much more benevolent for students to remain among their peers if the environment feels safe for them. Not only must we accept responsibility for the social and emotional needs of our students, but we can also use this tool to identify where we marginalize members of our population and how we can do better. It is in the district's best interest to attract and retain its residents rather than paying exorbitant tuition costs to alternative institutions. I trust that the board is taking retention seriously and look forward to seeing what we can do when we look within for answers about how we can serve throughout. Thank you for your time.
Melissa, thanks for the question. I do want to inform you, we have had a group of about 20 employees who have met. I think we've met about 4 times to begin to start that work to get the CARES Steering Committee creating a committee charter. Our goal is to have that set as a draft that we can get some community input and then get that to our school board for the June meeting. That's the goal. It's possible that there could be another month. But the group recognizes that our drop dead date was to essentially try to have this before the board at the end of the summer. So we will be starting the year with the CARES Committee project charter agreed upon, approved, and then the committee doing its work throughout the course of the next school year. So that's where we are on that. Certainly got a little bit behind with the work related to COVID, but I've really been happy with the conversations that the employees have been making. Mr. Palekis, who's our assistant principal at the high school, he's been a co-chair, and I've been asking him really to move that forward for us a little bit. What I don't want to see is the committee just look like, well, we're just doing everything Dr. Steinhoff said, so we really want different voices in that regard. And I apologize you didn't have the paper agenda. We always have them here, but I think we're a little out of practice after not
I get
being
it.
here for
No.
14 months, I think it's been, something like that. I normally bring over a pile and have them there, so we'll have them for the next one.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. That's good news.
Any comments by members of the board?
Oh, I
Oh,
also
no.
have a comment.
Sorry.
If we're still doing public comments. I have a few questions for the board.
Now, it's not a questions and answers. You're welcome to make statements, but we don't have a questions and answers session.
Okay, well, last month.
Can you please state your name and address?
Oh,
for the
yeah,
board?
sure, sorry.
Thank you.
Sue Fee Schaefer, 2350 Clearview Lane in Aston. So, last month, the board rejected a recommended candidate for a competitive position. And there were some concerns expressed about the selection process for this competitive position. So I was hoping the board would elaborate on what the concerns were for the selection process, and what discussions took place, and what the proposed changes to the selection process for the.
As of right now, as our solicitor's recommendation, we are not permitted to speak about personnel and litigation matters. What's that? It's currently.
Yes.
Well, I'm really asking
Ms.
about the selection process for the, within the hiring process for the district. I mean, that
It
is
could
kind of
have
what-
legal ramifications for the future, so
The part of your question, ma'am, that I think would fall under personnel and not allow this board to have the liberty to discuss that would be exactly questions of discussions with regard to an individual, their qualifications, or why the specific board members felt a specific way or made a choice with regard to personnel topics. Obviously, when applicants are there on a public agenda, they have specific rights as applicants and individuals, and just because a board didn't necessarily choose them doesn't necessarily mean that there was a problem or something else that would have disqualified them for the job. A board in general, ma'am, hires and fires based upon recommendations, but they're not necessarily and specifically bound by every recommendation that gets provided to them from an administrative practice. Obviously, the conversation of last month generated, I believe, some questions last month and some inquiries from board members as to how to better improve upon a policy that might not lead to the situation that occurred at last month's meeting. Those discussions are public discussions, ma'am. Those discussions with regard to policy and things like that would take place in an open fashion or an open meeting in a work session. And it's my understanding that that's a conversation the board would like to engage in, and that conversation will be engaged in publicly, most likely at a work session rather than a public board meeting. So there are some overall issues and some specific issues, and I know there are still some personnel continuing conversations on that topic that are not able to be elaborated upon, not because anyone is looking to keep anything from you, but they are rather personnel conversations and personnel topics that are shielded by the law so that the individuals involved in those conversations, so that their rights are protected as well.
Absolutely, and I want to be clear, I'm not asking about that position at all. I am asking about the policy and what proposed changes to the hiring policy there are which I feel like should be public.
Yes, there have not been any changes proposed to the hiring policy. There were some conversations very briefly last month, and then some individual board members had expressed questions or conversations to both myself and the administration with regard to potential review of those policies to change those, but there have been no changes made. And my recommendation to the board members as well as to the administration is to to always take a look around in your community to find out policies that work best for your board, because as many people may or may not know, there are, I think it's 500, maybe 501 school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Maybe there should be more, maybe there should be less, but there are 501 of them, and each one has a different feel, a different community, and selects members from that community to represent them on the board, and some of those policies or specific board preferences end up being incorporated into policies. So each board is different. My recommendation to the administration was to take a look around at what some of the other boards do. Not every board does everything the same way. There are some better practices that you can possibly find, and then the board, in a public forum, in a public discussion, can discuss what they feel with public input. They can then discuss what they feel would be the best policy moving forward. But as of right now, there have been no changes. My recommendation was that to take a look at some other policies and then to bring them forward in a public setting to discuss those, to see if there are some possible changes that better suits the board. There's always room for improvement. It's never bad to take a look around.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I'm curious, how common is it for other boards to select candidates and approve candidates for competitive positions?
Well, every board will
Actually selects and nominates a candidate and approves them?
Well, in terms of select and nominate, there are
in the same meeting?
No, there are many times that there would be a recommendation by the administration. Someone makes that nomination, the board selects them. So I would say the answer to that question is all folks do that. All boards, would do that. Your specific question is, I believe, and please correct me if I misstate your position, is that how often is it that there will be a nomination from a board member? And that depends on multiple positions and multiple things. Is it a rare occurrence? I would not say it's a rare occurrence, because I would not say it's rare only because it is worked out, and very, very rarely is there a situation that that ended up, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully, man, so I don't breach anyone's confidential rights. We found ourselves in that situation last month, and a motion was made. I believe it was permissible. I was asked my guidance on that. That was the advice that I rendered. I do believe it is permissible. It wasn't something I just picked up or made up out off the top of my head. I consulted with some of my fellow solicitors. I consulted with the PSBA board section as to it. There are some contractual terms there that, depending upon how the matter moves forward, that may or may not be interpreted. But obviously the goal of everyone after last month was not to be in that position again, to try and come to a position where there is a consensus and some consensus and a better process to that. Does it happen? Yes, it does happen. It certainly happens oftentimes. I often compare it at times to the board member selection process. You know, there's a vacancy on a board, and the law says the remaining members of the board pick that person. There's no advertisement for it, there's no requirement of a recommendation, there are none of those things. A lot of boards put more of a layer on top of that. This would be one of those situations where I would tell you that, in my opinion, the board was permitted to make that nomination and selection. It was the information provided to me by the administration as well as board members was that this matter needed to be voted upon last month due to some timing things that obviously were impacted, unfortunately, by COVID, and as many things have been. But I would not, that's a long-winded way of saying, I would only say it doesn't happen often because there is generally an ability to not have to disagree with the administration. There's generally a desire on most administration's part, most boards' part, to come to that consensus and that uniformity. That doesn't mean a board is bound by an administration's recommendation. They may be contractually for certain things, but I didn't believe this position was one of them.
Okay, and, but it does not happen often. It's, as you said, the long-winded way of saying, it does not happen often.
It doesn't happen often because you try to, that necessarily isn't, nobody would say that that is the best way to go about things. And, not with this specific situation, with any specific situation. You're looking to work hand in hand. At times, it becomes a challenging process with opinions of board members and opinions of administrators that sometimes clash. It's a healthy conversation at times. You look to try and do your best that healthy conversation does not negatively impact individuals. And that would be a reason to have a conversation about a change in a policy, which I believe board members and administration have agreed to take a look at.
And it is, it's my understanding that most boards, boards of directors, have direct responsibility to hire the superintendent, choose the superintendent, but that instructional positions, coaching positions, other positions that interact with students are not selected by the board.
It would vary. It varies by district in some areas. It varies by instructional capacity. If there are, it depends. You have there. When I say you, there are at times school boards that are comprised of educators, whether they be administrators, former administrators, or teachers in a different district that certainly like to play a larger role in that process. When it comes to the selection of administrators, the board often plays a larger process. And what that process is depends on the policies of each board, board by board. There is uniformity in some of it. There is not uniformity in some of it. That's what I was trying to say, that oftentimes, as long as the board is operating above the law, and what I mean above the law, not a basement. Your law is a basement at times, and then boards add on to it with various policies, and some do it a bit differently than others. It is not, a general statement of the board hires the board hires the superintendent, who then, she or he then oversees the administration and provides recommendations to the board. that then does not eliminate the board's decision-making process on multiple topics. So, I hope I answered your question.
And
Are we sticking to the policy and procedures for the past 3 minutes? Public participation, 3 minutes per person, correct?
okay, I have one more comment, is that certainly the board stuck to the letter of the statute and its own policies as far as conflicts of interest, but certainly not the appearance of a conflict of interest, the spirit of the statute and the spirit of the policy was blatant, that there was a conflict of interest with this particular personnel. And so I feel like it is incumbent to
That's it.
explain why there isn't a conflict of
There
interest.
will not be an explanation, public comments over. Thank you. Future meetings are Wednesday, June 16th, a study session here at the Service Center, and the business meeting here on the 23rd at the Service Center. The board has requested a executive session following this. Motion for adjournment?
So moved.